First of all, I want to congratulate you on beginning your home search, and I'm really honored to be joining you on this journey. First, I'd like to just take this minute to explain a very important tool in this process and in our relationship. In Washington State, we refer to this tool or document as the Buyer Brokerage Services Agreement, or the BBSA. Now, the BBSA is a document we'll need to sign before we start looking at homes together. And I just want you to understand why it's in your best interest as well as mine. In recent years, there have been some changes in the real estate industry due to settlements involving the National Association of Realtors and all major brokerages. These changes affect how buyers agents like me work with buyers like you. One of the biggest changes is a move towards formal representation. This means our working relationship needs to be clearly defined right up front. In the past, the relationship between a buyer and their agent was often informal. Agents often showed properties and worked with a buyer without a formal agreement. But now, before we start touring homes and actively working towards buying a property, we're required to have a BBSA in place. Think of it like the listing agreement a seller signs. It formalizes our working relationship. And you wonder, why is this important? Well, I believe there are three main reasons. First of all, it ensures you have an agent dedicated to your interests. Second, it clearly outlines my responsibilities to you in that document. And third, it protects both you and me. And just a quick note, if you want to pop into an open house, you don't need a BBSA in place for that specific visit. Open houses are public events hosted by the seller's agent on their behalf. I think it's also helpful in this discussion to understand the three main agreements in a real estate transaction. There's a listing agreement that's between the seller and their agent. There's this buyer agreement that I'm talking about, BBSA. That's between you, the buyer, and me, your agent. And there's the purchase agreement, or the purchase and sale agreement, as we call it in Washington. And that's the contract between the buyer and the seller. The buyer agreement and the listing agreement are all about your representation, while the purchase and sale agreement outlines the terms of the sale. In the past, the seller typically paid both their agent and the buyer's agent. The seller would agree to a total commission, and a portion of which would be shared with the agent bringing the buyer. We called this cooperative compensation. Going forward, things are changing. There are a few different scenarios now for how I, as your buyer's agent, might be paid. Scenario number one looks like the seller still pays both their agent and your agent directly. Scenario number two, you, the buyer, pay your agent directly. Scenario number three, a combination, the seller and buyer both contribute to your agent's compensation. And a fourth scenario would be the seller offers a concession, which is essentially a credit to you, the buyer, that you can then use to pay your agent. The key takeaway here is that the old system of cooperative compensation, where the agents automatically share the compensations, that's gone away. We're moving to a system where compensation is more direct, either from the seller or from the buyer. And this is called a decoupling of compensation, offers more transparency, and in the end, I think is better. While the mechanics of how agents are paid are definitely changing, the end result will likely be similar. The goal is still to get you into the home of your dreams, but the path to get there might look a little different. I believe this new way is more transparent, and that you know exactly how your agent is being compensated, and it's better for negotiating as it gives you potential leverage in your negotiations. The BBSA is all about transparency and ensuring that we're both on the same page. It outlines my commitment to you, clarifies how I'll be compensated, protects your interests throughout the home buying process. And I know this can seem a little complex, so please do not hesitate to ask me any questions along the way about this document or anything else in this complicated transaction. Just remember, I'm here to guide you every step of the way.